don't think it's any secret to those of us in the administration that the final results did fall short of what we had hoped in the way of some of the reform. But I believe that the effort that we put in formulating our own proposals for this year's Farm Bill, the discussions and the debate we opened up across the country for everyone to participate, really did have a positive effect on the process. The fault lines that we believe we exposed during this Farm Bill debate, fault lines involving priorities between rural and the suburban members of Congress, between the traditional ag interests, if you will, and those who advocate perhaps less traditional funding for nutrition and conservation programs. I think those fault lines are only going to grow weaker and wider as time goes on. That's why we did seek very much to try and bridge as many of those difficulties and gaps as we could in our own Farm Bill recommendations, but really what we call trying to modernize existing farm policies. We sought to broaden the farm policy base that was out there as much as possible, a farm policy base so that farm programs were looked upon favorably in all regions of the country, not just in a couple of states, but in all regions of the country. I will tell you, folks, in light of the budget pressure that the next administration is facing, the debate over income and payment limits, and we talked a little bit about this in particular, I think is going to come back and face us again. I, for one, do believe that our farm interests, we ourselves, need to deal with this issue. We need to deal with it ourselves, or else I believe somebody else is going to deal with it for us. Because I just think many aspects of who is getting the payments and how those payments are being distributed are just very, very difficult. And you can't have a program survive when literally every editorial page in the entire country is writing against us. I think it's a challenge for us that we ought to seize. We ought to fix this problem ourselves so that we can have a farm bill that truly does benefit all of production agriculture in a way that is sustainable and supported by broad people. And I think there's general support out there in the public for helping farmers in general, particularly during tough times, but not the kind of help that we've seen. Again, it's sort of fundamentally linked to some of the flaws that we saw in the current Farm Bill, a missed opportunity, we think, to fix the Farm Bill and actually have something that was more broadly supported by Americans wholeheartedly across the country. I will tell you, in fact, on this same topic, we've already heard the President-elect questioning the share of farm subsidy payments going to people who are among the wealthiest Americans among us. It was the one example that the President-elect cited when asked by a reporter what specifically he intended to do to reduce federal spending, and this was his response. So we have not dodged this bullet, and again, I would argue this is something we ought to fix ourselves, fix within our own family, so that we can do this right. The great part about it is that so much of it is value-added demand. We were traditionally a raw commodity exporter. Today we are exporting our beef, our pork, our chicken, dairy, big exporters of dairy. Roger, 15 years ago, if we would have talked about dairy exports, people would have looked at you like, where are you from? And we're big exporters of dairy products today. And of course, folks, for you guys from the Midwest, where I come from, where it's corn and soybeans, understand, when we export that pound of milk, or when we export those slabs of bacon and the beef and everything else, we're exporting corn and beans with that same product. It's just value added, and we win very, very much in that situation. So there's great news in these developing markets. I would just tell you that is why throughout the 8 years that President Bush has been in office, this administration has put expanding trade opportunities as the highest priority item. And we promoted it, frankly, through thick and thin. Sometimes it was a popular message. Sometimes it was like, here they go again. But I will tell you, we believe strongly in that situation and believe strongly in the impact that it has upon the livelihood of our farms and ranches across the country. Obviously, I think the results really do kind of speak for themselves. We've got $30 billion a year of trade under NAFTA. Our Dominican Republic Central American Free Trade Agreement is exceeding expectations a lot. We're now exporting $2 billion worth of our farm goods there. We've pushed hard for bilateral trade agreements with Colombia, Korea, Panama. I hope, ladies and gentlemen, that Congress has the fortitude to approve those agreements. Those are agreements that are just a win-win situation for American agriculture. And again, without those markets, it's pretty hard for somebody to stand up and say they're a friend of agriculture if they're not going to allow those selling opportunities in those markets. And again, need I underscore the fact that particularly in those three trade agreements, these are countries that already have unfettered access to the U.S. market in both agriculture as well as non-agricultural goods. These are trade agreements that are being held up, refused to pass, that only benefit our own exporters, particularly, in this case, agricultural products. They are hungry for our beef. They're hungry for our pork down there. It's beyond how we dealt to pass these agreements. So, bottom line, the U.S. Ag Agenda is by no means concluded. We're going to hand off an important agenda to that next team coming in, and I think, the question becomes, what do they do with that? Are they going to continue to seek those kind of market opportunities, or are they going to pull back a little bit, perhaps go a little bit more to the populism of anti-trade rhetoric? I sure hope it's the former in this case, folks. For American agriculture's sake, we need that to be the case. We don't talk quite as much about energy in the last few months because, things have changed a little bit, but you still have to strongly recognize the impact that energy is having upon the agricultural economy in this country, and it's still substantial. And I will tell you one of the points we continue to try and make. I hope, again, this is a legacy that we can hand to the new team so that they can make these points as well. We've had some food price inflation in this country. Our team of economists are telling us, 6% now, a little over 6% is about what we're expecting. That's high by historical standards, not something you like to see in terms of rising food prices. But, Keith, we still estimate that within that 6%, that only somewhere around 0.4 to 0.8% of that 6% is attributable to biofuels and the rising demand for ethanol. 0.4 to 0.8, somewhere in that vicinity, a very small portion of that 6%. And again, this is just a point we need to continue to make. Whether you're for or against biofuels, it's one thing, but let's at least have a legitimate debate based upon the facts. And, these articles that just simply say, we've got an increase in biofuels, and because of that, food price inflation is now 6%. We need a better analysis. We need better numbers associated with that so that we can make, real honest assessments. And I think one of our roles that we have tried to play over the last several months is just simply being the teller of factual information. Obviously, we like biofuels in the Department of Agriculture. I'm not hiding from that, but at the same time, too, we have an obligation to provide factual information. This debate has not been centered on a lot of factual information, and we need to continue that course. And again, I hope the new team will pick up that banner and continue to be an advocate for good, solid, analytical information when it comes to how we proceed forward with our renewable fuels market, which has had, again, such a tremendous impact upon our agricultural situation for these last 18 months.